God's peace. This is my review of the movie Paul, Apostle of Christ. It is a dramatization of the terrible times of persecution and suffering that the church in Rome endured at the hands of the Emperor Nero, who had accused the church of burning the city of Rome. History has proven that it was actually Nero himself who did it, but he blamed the Christians and used that as an excuse to do some of the most terrible, horrifying things to those who follow Christ. The movie is rather accurate in its descriptions of the sufferings, and I need to caution you that it may be too intense for some of the children to see this, although you may say that they see worse things, but this was real. So please exercise discernment, because there are scenes, for example, of Christians being lit on fire to serve as torches in the streets of Rome, and that is historically accurate. The movie took pains not to be too graphic. You do see Christians going into the circus, the arenas, to be martyred, but you do not see the actual martyrdom. So the scenes of violence are limited, but the ones that do show in the movie are rather intense. Now, in terms of the movie's accuracy, it is generally accepted that Paul did have a double imprisonment in Rome. He went there twice. At the end of the book of Acts, we find him in a house being guarded, and he spent there 2 years. In fact, that's how the book of Acts ends. Now, in the movie, they seem to have blended the two different Roman imprisonments. We have studied in history that after Paul appeared for the first time before Nero, before the persecution happened, he was most likely set free and was able to travel as he always wanted to, as far as Spain. However, by the years of AD 66 and 67, when the Neronian persecution began, Paul did go back to Rome, and that is exactly where we find him now. So the timing is a bit off of the persecution itself, but that's something that you need to take into consideration. The fact that Luke was with Paul is biblical. In fact, Paul literally says in one of his letters, "Only Luke is with me." So that's also quite accurate. The actor who portrays Luke is the same actor who portrayed Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. That might be a little distracting to those of you who've seen The Passion. It was for me, because I kept expecting the actor, Jim Caviezel, to speak as if he was Jesus, but he wasn't actually. He was doing the part of Luke, who was known in the Bible as the beloved physician. So that's a minor point. In terms of other points of accuracy, Paul was a Roman citizen, and Roman citizens were not allowed to be beaten, whipped, as you see Paul having been whipped in this movie. He was indeed beaten in the synagogues by the Jews, and the Bible does say that several times. But the only time we see him almost beaten by the Romans, he told them he was a citizen and he was exempted. So the scenes where Paul has been beaten, you see the scars on his back from Roman beatings, that's not accurate. That didn't happen to him. He was exempted from that. And that's the reason why at the end of the movie, Paul actually suffers martyrdom by beheading and not by crucifixion, not by being set on fire or so forth. He was a legitimate Roman citizen, having been a citizen of Tarsus. So the accuracy there was a bit wanting. But in terms of the overall feel of the movie, it's very intense. It's very powerful. It will disturb you, as it should, when you see Christians, especially children, going through terrible times of suffering. And the question as to why God doesn't intervene is going to come up. You're going to wonder to yourself, why didn't the Lord send an angel to deliver them, as he did to on behalf of other people in the book of Acts and throughout history, actually. There was a scene where the Roman prefect asks Paul that if he prays to Christ, will Christ heal his daughter? And Paul says he doesn't know, because Christ's ways are higher than our ways. And that's an accurate representation. We cannot make those guarantees. We can pray and believe and trust. Ultimately, God is the one that makes the decision. It's interesting how in the movie, spoiler alert, in case you don't want to know too many details, then pause it here and skip ahead a little bit. But in that scene of the daughter being sick, it's actually Luke who heals the daughter through medical knowledge. So it's an interesting take. I think it's a 21st century take on what would have happened, because we do see Paul praying for sick Romans in the Bible, the book of Acts, and God healing them. So I think it's basically trying to balance out the supernatural, which is mentioned, and the prefix does say that Paul has been known to have powers. And Paul's response was right out of the New Testament. He says he has no powers at all, that he boasts only in his weakness, that the power of Christ would rest upon him. Literally from the pages of the New Testament. Wonderfully done. And in terms of the movie itself being an inspiration, it's a difficult time to watch in certain parts. And it is painful. But at the same time, it ends on a high note, on a positive note. And I won't spoil the ending for you, but the last scenes of the movie make up for all the suffering that you see throughout the film. The actors who played Aquila and Priscilla did a fantastic job. The people who played the parts of Christians in Rome also did really well. All in all, I say it's a good movie to watch, a good movie to study, a good movie to meditate on, because it does represent, not flawlessly, but properly, a lot of what the Christians back then must have been doing when they were hiding from being killed in such torturous, terrible ways. And as one writer of the early church wrote, it is the blood of the martyrs that became the seed of the church. From their suffering sprung up many, many multitudes of people who gave their hearts to Jesus Christ. And that is mentioned also in the movie. So overall, for accuracy, I would give it a B+. For spirituality, for inspiration, for impact, a definite A. So I would love to hear your responses, your thoughts when you see the movie. Let me know what you think about it, and I pray that it be a blessing to you, as ultimately, after having watched it all, it was to me. God's peace and blessing to you, now and always.